Hey solos, it's Samantha and I have a solo story for you this weekend. I am so excited to be able to share with you this solo story that I was able to record with Wendy Green. We met on Facebook in the Disney Solo Travelers group, and she just shared the most wonderful, heartfelt, thoughtful story about the way that she went to Disney by herself and planned a trip for her inner child, an inner child that would have faced abuse and things like that. And she's like, what does this child need in order to heal? And I was so moved by her story. I wasn't the only one. So many people commented, but I was so moved by her story. I was like, will you come on the podcast? Will you come on the number one podcast for solo travel to Disney World? Number one because only, but we're going to stick with number one. And she said yes, and it's been so wonderful. I've been holding on to this episode for a couple months now because I wanted to make sure that it had enough air to breathe and kind of the landscape of things that I've been posting. And it was such a special, special conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. But I just did all the introduction to Wendy without even introducing the podcast. But you probably have heard the podcast before. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Disney Solo Magic. As I said, the number one podcast for solo travel to Disney World. It is so exciting to share these solo stories with you. I just really, really love interviewing people. And it's always so difficult in the summer to make arrangements with people. Everyone's traveling, etc., etc. So I'm hoping to bring you some more of these stories in the fall and winter. But until then, here's Wendy's story. You can follow me on Instagram and Threads and Facebook and the blog and all of that stuff. All those links are below, but you can also follow Wendy on Instagram and Facebook, and those links are below as well. I feel like this introduction has been all over the place, but that doesn't matter. You just want to hear Wendy. And as always, I'd love to hear from you and to be able to hear about your own solo stories. So again, connect with me on Instagram. All right, let's get into it and hear from Wendy. So Wendy, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. We've already done so much non-recorded preamble that I know this is going to be just the most amazing conversation. Can you please introduce yourself to all of the listeners?
Sure. My name is Wendy Green, and I live right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, in Canton, Georgia, so up in horse country. And I'm really excited to be here on this podcast, being able to talk with you.
Can you talk about your Disney journey?
I can definitely do that. So I don't have a very long Disney history. I remember visiting Disney once when I was a child, maybe about 10 years old with my dad. I don't have many memories around it, except that it was middle of summer, very crowded. Nothing was organized or planned. It was just this kind of being thrown into it and not really doing much, right? And then I remember going once when I was 16 years old, and this was with my mother. And just for history, my parents are divorced, so one vacation was with my father, and then one was with my mother when I was 16. And again, I think my mom was there for something with her job. And so it was my sister and I exploring the parks on our own, which is cool as a 16-year-old. But again, it wasn't like Disney was calling to me. It wasn't until I had my children where I took my girls to Disney when they were maybe 12 and I want to say 7 or 8. And that was my first experience where I walked down Main Street and saw Cinderella's castle, and it just hit me everything I missed from my childhood. I don't know what came over me, but I'm getting very emotional talking about it now. And it was just being able to experience that with my girls and giving them the opportunity to have what I was feeling. It was just magic. And I'm there is something so healing about this place. And at that time, I wasn't in a place to really identify what it was. So I felt it, but I didn't have the words to describe what I was feeling. And so we did that vacation. It was awesome. I planned it to the hilt. One thing you might want to know about me is I am not a go with the flow girl. I am a planner, from the time I wake up until the time I go to bed.
I love it.
And that is just how I am. I don't want to miss out on anything. So my sister always jokes, if you want the best Disney trip ever, have Wendy plan it for you because you will see everything. But I just wanted my girls to make the most of it. And we didn't have a lot of resources either. So we were on a tight budget, and I wanted to do everything with my kids, and I wanted them to have those experiences, and we couldn't afford, the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique or anything like that. So I actually created a boutique in our hotel room, and got my kids all
Adorable.
ready. All of the bounding and the costuming wasn't like super popular back then, because I would have to say that was probably like in the maybe like 2007 or something. So it
Mhm.
wasn't like how it is now. But and then I went a few times. I went to Disney a few times, Disney World a few times with my ex-husband, and him and I just went on our own. One was for a business trip for me, and then one was a business trip for him, and we kind of just tagged along with each other and experienced Disney just as adults without children. And again, it was just that same, it was very, the word that always comes up for me when I'm in Disney is I just feel the sense of liberation, the sense of
Mm.
freedom. And when I went to Disney with my ex-husband, and he was doing all his work stuff, that was the first time I got to experience the parks all by myself. And so it wasn't necessarily a solo trip, but I did get to go into the parks by myself, eat what I wanted to eat and do all those things. But it was always with that underlying, oh, I got to be back at this
Right.
time. I got to be, so there was still a schedule. And then, from there, I was experiencing Disney with my sister and her family, and she's got two little boys, so planning trips with them, and that was really beautiful. And then I'm like, you know what? I feel like I need to experience Disneyland. So then
Right.
my current husband and I took a trip to Disneyland and got to experience the 100th anniversary party in Disneyland,
Oh,
and that
that's
was
cool.
really fun. Um, and then, oh, one thing I did forget to say in 2017, I did get to go to Disneyland Hong Kong too.
Ooh, that's
So,
exciting.
yeah, my oldest daughter lives in Hong Kong. So,
Oh, wow.
while I was visiting her, I was able to go to Hong Kong Disney. But again, I don't know, it just wasn't really like there yet, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I will tell you that I have I had one of my very best friends was a Disney cast member, and she loved everything Disney. Like her whole house was Disney. All her clothes were Disney. Everything was Disney. And her and I were planning to do a trip together. And then she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Mm.
And I went through treatment with her, even to the point of in the evenings when her husband was working, I would come over and give her injections in her belly and just sit with her for hours and hours. And we talked about planning this trip together. And then she passed away.
Oh,
She died.
gosh. I'm so
And so we never
sorry.
got to take that trip. And so from then on, it's just like every time I feel the need to like go to Disney, like I feel like if Lolita, her name was Lolita, if
Yeah.
Lolita was here, we would be on a plane going to
Yeah.
Disney right now. And so it's just like living in that moment of life is so short, life is too
Yeah.
short. And so really losing Lolita is what pushed me into that, like where people will look at me and be like, she is the crazy Disney lady. So, and sometimes it does take, a traumatic experience to really discover the things that you need in your life. And Disney is definitely something that, people might look at it and say, oh, it's, frivolous, or, there's no depth there, or there's really no point. It's a vacation. It's a children's playground. Like it's an amusement park. How is this, bringing
All of
you
those
closer?
things are completely wrong.
Exactly.
Even you just saying that, I was like, no.
No. But people look at you and think like, you're an adult, you're spending thousands of dollars on these trips for what, right? Why don't you want to explore this place or this place? Why does everything, why is Disney always the spot? And, losing Lolita kind of propelled me forward also in my healing journey, which
Mm.
is something that, I've been struggling with my whole life, is looking at the trauma I experienced as a child. And I know the post that I had made on our solo trip page on Facebook was actually the first time I'd ever posted anything personal about my past on a public forum ever, because as a child, I was silenced. So as
Mm-hmm.
a child, I was subjected to my parents' craziness. And I did experience sexual abuse and physical abuse, verbal abuse, and literally lived in emotional chaos,
Yeah.
never being able to have any sort of stability, and always living in survival mode. And, that's hard for an adult to live in that state, let alone a child. So
Mm-hmm.
always living in this place of, am I safe? Is it a safe environment? Never knowing what's coming up next. There was no schedule. It was always just like, if I cried, what is this going to happen to me? If I get upset, is this going to happen to me? So I kind of dulled everything about myself. I cut off all my hair when I was little. I mean, I dulled my sparkle. I didn't want to be noticed. I didn't want anybody to see me. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was disgusting. I thought everything about me was just gross.
Mm-hmm.
And the the one thing, and I feel like I'm feeling a little scattered, but that happens sometimes when
Of
I
course. No
get
worries.
emotional. So if I'm scattered, I apologize. But this last solo trip, which was actually my first solo trip, that I wrote about in that post, I had this moment where I did have photo pass, and I stopped at every single photo pass photographer, even like when you're walking down Main Street and they're like one after another. I stopped at every single one. So I have pictures like castle far away, castle a little closer, castle
Yeah.
even closer. Like, oh, I'm right up in the castle. And I had this realization of, this realization of like, I I'm not broken. I'm not
Mm.
disgusting. Like, I am beautiful and I deserve to be in front of the camera. And
Totally.
that was like so powerful. And I said, if that was the one realization that I took away from this trip, it was worth all the planning and all the
Yeah.
money and everything, just to have that realization of, no, I am beautiful, and
Mm-hmm.
my I deserve to be photographed, and my photographs deserve to be seen. And it was just, it took me back to that little girl always hiding, never wanting her picture taken, pulling out her eyelashes, making herself look so just, I didn't want to be noticed. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want anybody to look at me. And
Yeah.
so that was so powerful. And, you know, just to rewind a little bit, I will let you know that, I did divorce my first husband, and I am remarried. I I decided to take this solo trip about a year ago, and it just kept coming up to me. I just kept thinking about, like, I need to do something where I can completely choose myself, like
Mm-hmm.
every time choose myself. And I I sat down. I was really nervous to tell my husband, like, I want to go on vacation without you. But I did. I sat down with him and I just said, take I need to take this trip. And it has to be to Disney. And he's not like a huge Disney guy. Like, he'll go with me and we enjoy the parks, but he's not like, ooh, it's got to be Disney all the time. But I sat down and I just said, I really need to go to Disney on my own. It's just something I need to do. And at that time, I couldn't explain it in a way that he would be like, oh, yeah, I get that. But he was supportive. He's like, if that's what you need to do, then, you do that. And, it took about a year of me planning. And I will tell you, the planning was just as important as actually going on the
Yeah.
trip for me. I know you saw a lot of my photos, and I planned like every outfit down to,
I loved it.
like
I loved it.
just every detail was covered, like my earrings, to my jewelry, like my necklace, like everything was planned. And to me, that was so like the planning part was just so cathartic and so healing too, because I planned this trip as as the adult, but planning for the 8-year-old Wendy. And
Yeah.
I chose 8 because that was the year that my abuse started.
Mm,
And I thought, what would 8-year-old Wendy want? What does 8-year-old Wendy need? What would happen if I chose 8-year-old Wendy every single time?
yeah.
Like give into everything and everything that she wanted. And so that's how I planned my outfits. Like I literally like, what are my favorite characters? Who do I want to like represent today? Who, and it was so funny because every character experience I had too when I was dressed up, like representing them, they got so excited. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like, like it sparked such amazing conversation with the characters, and people might think that's crazy too, but
Well,
it's
conversation, especially with characters that don't talk. And I was like, oh, no, I had a full conversation. Yeah.
yeah, you can too. Like
Yeah,
you can
totally.
totally
Totally.
like I can have a full conversation with Mickey and Minnie and
Yeah. Yeah.
and Goofy, like everybody. Like I can talk to everybody. But no, it was just it really that part of the just the planning of the outfits, planning of my itineraries and what I want to do and where I want to eat, and feeling tired at the parks and then being like, I'm closing this park down. I
Yeah.
don't care. But I didn't have anyone else to consider. I didn't have to say like, I know you're tired, but do you mind if we stay? It was like, I'm tired, but I'm here. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And so it was just something like, as I when I after I was done on on the trip and came home, I did take a few weeks to just reflect on everything I experienced. And again, it was taking this childhood that was so dark, and taking that little girl Wendy and putting her in this magical place where literally, I mean, I walked into Sir Mickey's and got sprinkled with glitter, and I mean, it was so magical and so healing. And even posting on our solo page, which I did have a lot of trepidation about doing it. I wasn't sure if I really should do it. And I'm so happy that I did. I think, I noticed that there were quite a few comments, and out of, I think, like 500 comments, there was one negative. So
What does
to
that
me,
negative comment say?
just something about like, it was just one out of
Yeah,
everybody.
I
So it was
was like,
really like
who would
insignificant.
even like
But
say
it was just
anything
like,
negative?
oh, this world has gotten something, this world is insufferable. And this is a page about Disney. And, we only
Rude.
want to hear about your Disney trips. We don't want to hear the backstories of anything. And
I
so, but
mean, that
nobody
sounds like a
commented.
person that has to deal with their own healing
Well,
because
and
if
that's why I
you're
said,
a Disney adult, like you must know that there are so many layers to people's trips. Like, yeah.
absolutely. And that's what I said. Obviously, he needed my post because it's
Yeah,
triggering something for him. So
totally.
he needs to look at something in his life that is, that's obviously disturbing him, that he's not ready to look at. Either that, I thought that, and then I had like the flip side, or he's a bully, and it's
Right.
triggering that, because I did live with abusive parents, and I was, married to someone that wasn't always the nicest, and had an addiction issue, was an alcoholic. So maybe that was
Or
triggering.
both of those things, right? Like it's
Oh,
triggering
absolutely.
and that's the way it's coming out. Anyway, we shouldn't be dwelling on the negative
I
one, but
know.
I
That's
was
it,
just
because
like,
I let
I'm
it
just
bother
like,
me
that's
for
so
about.
crazy. Why would anyone say anything rude? Like,
But that's why I was like, I let it bother me for 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh man, he's got his own stuff to
yeah,
work out.
you're like, oh, shut up. Yeah, yeah, you got
But
your own
it
stuff.
But it did, like, a lot of the comments were like, thank you for posting this. I'm living a similar story, and I have a similar past, and I've just booked my trip because I read this post. So
Oh,
if my post helped one person, and whether they booked the trip or not, but if it showed them like you can do this and you can get on a plane by yourself, you can check into your hotel, you can go to the parks, you can navigate, you can choose, like, I want a Dole Whip for dinner, and then I'm going to have that, like Rapunzel shortcake for dessert. And you can do that.
yeah.
Like,
Well,
you
there's
can.
so many things that I wanted to like comment on in that story that you shared. And one thing I wanted to say is like that initial post, all those pictures that you posted were so joyous. Like you had such like beauty and joy radiating through. And so it's really interesting that you're like sharing the other part of like getting the photo pass and taking the photos, because to me, when I looked at those photos, I was like, wow, this is a woman that like is like kind of far along in her healing journey to like step into it. So it's kind of interesting to like hear these other elements. And I just loved how you articulated that you did the plan for your 8-year-old self, because I think that a lot of Disney adults, especially ones that like don't like live in Florida, so it's not like they're like going every day just for the, the
Mhm.
hell of it or whatever. There is an element to that, and I just really loved how you claimed that and articulated that, and I thought it was a really beautiful way to articulate, I think, something a lot of people do go for, but maybe can't like touch, like maybe can't really do that articulation. And yeah, I thought it was just really beautiful.
Thank you. And it has taken me years,
Yeah,
years
yeah,
to get to where I am now.
yeah.
If you asked me 5 years ago to have this conversation with you, I couldn't do it
Yeah.
because I wasn't there. I can now take that step back and look at my life from a completely different perspective, where
Hmm.
I can say, was the abuse that I endured bad? Should I put a label on it? Well, most people would. They would say, I'm so sorry you endured that. I'm so sorry you went through that. And I will tell people, I'm not, because I
Mm.
wouldn't be right here where I am today,
Yeah.
experiencing this beautiful life that I have now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not saying like, yeah, I would put myself through that again,
Right, of
but
course.
I don't feel sorry that it happened anymore. Where
Yeah.
before I would say, of course it was terrible. Of course I shouldn't have gone through that. Of of course you should feel sorry for me. But I don't have those feelings anymore because I'm able to look at it as, okay, I went through all of that, but look at
Mm.
where I am now.
Yeah.
And I can take all of that, and like, life just gave me this huge gift of being able to say, yeah, that happened to you. And now you get to experience this beauty because you're able to
Mm.
actually look at it. You're
Yeah.
actually able to look at your trauma, look at your triggers, and move forward.
Yeah.
And it's not about saying like, oh yeah, that makes me angry, or oh, I'm so upset. Like, of course, like I feel angry that that happened to me. I feel sad. I mean, if we're going to be honest, like last night I had a lot of, I call them like, nightmares or night
Mm.
terrors,
Mm.
which I suffer from to this day as a 48-year-old woman. I suffer from night terrors from my childhood abuse. And I woke up this morning in a panic, all clenched. I had my nails were dug into my palms.
Mm.
So I still experience the effects of the abuse, but it doesn't control me anymore.
Mm.
I'm not suffering anymore.
Yeah.
And being able to experience Disney in a way, like at this perfect time in my life where
Hmm.
there's no suffering. There's no suffering. So I think when we are able to actually see things for what they truly are, rather than constantly labeling good or bad or whatever it is we're labeling. When we remove all the labels and just experience,
Yeah.
because someone could have, I could have walked in with someone, I could have walked into Disney World with someone or Magic Kingdom with someone side by side, having the same exact experiences, and they could have a completely different, you know,
Right.
experience in the park. They could be like, oh my God, everybody's rude and there's too many people.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because when you are traveling with someone, like their own mood, their own healing journey, their own experiences are going to like influence that. And that's why I think solo travel is so great because you can really just like keep a pulse on just your energy, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and that is, I think for a lot of people and a lot of women in particular, like that is rare and that's a gift.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's something you have to intentionally do,
Yes. Yeah.
because especially women, they want to make sure, well, I shouldn't generalize, but most women,
Hmm.
you know, are caretakers and they want to
Yeah.
make sure everyone else's needs are met. And then add in, like, if you have a partner, if you have children, I mean, then you are last
Yeah.
always, and for me, always feeling last as a child
Mhm.
was like like for me, it just felt natural, like always putting, my husband first, always putting my children first, never choosing me. I would even, I mean, putting my dogs first.
Yeah.
Everybody was first,
Yeah.
except, and then I would always take the scraps.
Yeah.
And I think it is like this beautiful revelation, this beautiful eye-opening experience where all of a sudden you begin to choose yourself. And it
Hmm.
might be something so small where every single day I'm going to choose one thing. And
Hmm.
it might start out small. And then maybe after a month or 2 months, you might be say, okay, now I'm going to choose two things every day that are just for me. And it could be something so simple as I'm going to go for a walk because I want to go for a walk, not because someone invited me or not because I feel like I have to, because I want to. Or
Hmm.
I am going to eat this cookie because I want the cookie,
Right.
right? Not because like I'm at a celebration or, whatever it is. I'm just saying, like, we have to intentionally choose, and then you get to this point where I can do an entire Disney trip where every moment is choosing me. Every moment, it's just like what time I want to wake up, what time I want to go to bed, what I want to do during the day, what I want to eat. I don't have to discuss, like, what restaurant do I want to go to?
Yeah,
Do I
totally.
even want to have a meal right now? Would I rather wait in line and ride a ride? Would I rather, whatever it is, you can do it. Do I just want to stroll aimlessly around the park and, look at little details that you miss when you're with a whole family?
One of the things I was thinking of when you were talking about like planning a trip just for your 8-year-old self, and I've talked about this in the podcast a lot, that I don't think a lot of people really like think about their own like preferences really, right? Like it's so easy to kind of like go with the flow and be like, yeah, yeah, this is fine in relationship to that, right? But like, oh no,
Right.
what is it I actually like want in this moment? What do I need in this moment? And I think Disney is a place that you can practice that. And one of the things I've said a lot in the podcast is like, just know when you're going solo, you can't make a wrong decision. Like maybe it's not a decision you would make again, but you're learning about yourself. And if that's not a huge part of your daily life, learning about your own wants and your own needs, then just
Yeah.
like know that that is part of it. And you can't fail at Disney. It's such a safe place to be able to do all that exploration, right? Like
It is.
yeah, it's like when I we've talked about safety a lot on the podcast. But I think like the safety of trying things, the safety of doing things that are outside your comfort zone is such a huge, huge part for me, at least, of the Disney experience. And I think that even just the notion of going solo, even just making a choice for yourself is part of that too.
Absolutely. And I think, as women going solo, we
Hmm.
do think about, the physical safety of,
Yeah.
where am I staying? What does my transportation look like? How am I going to get from the airport to the resort, or whatever that looks like for you? We're always thinking about that safety. But I mean, you do bring up that point of it's also this emotional safety as
Hmm.
well, where you're not going to get in trouble because there are no wrong choices. So
Yeah.
again, I'm going to use that word liberation.
Hmm.
You do not have to think about, these consequences of your actions as far as like, if we were going to label something like a negative consequence,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to just explore this today and, it might be amazing or it might not. Or, like my thing was everybody says, "Oh, when you're in Magic Kingdom, I know like you have to get on Small World. You just have to do it because it's iconic and you have to get on that ride." Well, I walked past that ride like 20 times and there was like zero wait, like multiple times. And I like, not riding that ride,
Yeah.
not riding that ride. It's not my
Yeah.
favorite. And I'm like, if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it because
Yeah.
there's no one around me saying we have to do this because it's iconic.
Yeah. Well, one of the
So
things I try not to do in the podcast is like it's a fine line. Like I don't want to give recommendations because I want people to like do whatever they want to do. So I'm like, this recommendation is like based on my criteria for things. So really use it as a model of your criteria for things. And then, right. And I think
absolutely.
that's a great example. Like if iconic rides are not your thing, then no, you don't need to go on small ride. And it's interesting because a lot of people will be like, oh, people mover. And I was like, I was on the people mover. Like, that's not really a big deal, but it doesn't matter. We're not competing. Like, that is a great experience for you.
It is amazing. And I do love iconic rides. I'm just not a fan of Small World. Like Haunted Mansion is number one. Like I
Yeah.
love Haunted Mansion. I have to go on Carousel Progress every time.
Yeah.
This last time though, Carousel Progress did me in because I got on and I was on it for about an hour.
Oh
It get
no.
stuck. And so I was like, I don't know what year I was in, but I was in that same year for about 40 minutes.
Oh my gosh. At least you were
It must have
cool.
been the very last one where they're like kind of that this it's like they try to make it look technologically
Contemporary. Yeah.
advanced, but you can tell it's still like from like the 90s or something.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I was like stuck in that loop where like the oven blew up. Like I think we got to see it like 7 times. So
Like too much, too
I was like,
much.
but then again, I was like, I didn't have anyone complaining next to me. I literally just closed my eyes and I'm like, air condition, 40-minute
Yeah.
nap,
Yeah.
here we go.
Yeah.
But again, if I was with someone, I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Like I picked this ride and
Totally.
now I'm
Totally.
down. And I would be apologizing, like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, but I
So,
didn't.
so what is
Okay.
something that you did solo or will want to do in the future solo that you wouldn't do with anybody else other than maybe like the worry around it, but like that was something that was like just for you on your solo trip?
Yeah, in Disney,
Yeah.
or let's see. Hmm. I don't know if I can pinpoint one thing because
It was the whole
I feel
thing.
I feel like everything I did was, even if I've had that experience before with someone else, it was so new.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I love
but
that.
I think the biggest thing is when you're with so many people and you're constantly rushing from one thing to the next, you
Mm,
don't get to actually be. And
yeah.
so, like, for me, it was actually being able to enjoy and being in that moment, even with the chaos.
Right.
So, like when we look at my history and living in chaos for so many years, pretty much my whole life since until 2019, all this chaos and not being able to find peace in the chaos. And when you
Hmm.
go into Disney, it is like it's sensory overload.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, we got to do this, we got to go here, we got to do this, we got to eat this, we got to, and so literally being able to stop and just enjoy every moment,
Yeah.
even though there was that chaos around me. And then like bringing that into like everyday life. Like we can't always control the environment we're put in, but we don't have to be part of it. We don't have to be part of
Right.
the chaos. And
Right.
so for me, going into that situation and having that experience of I can slow down. I don't have to I don't have to be on like hyperdrive all the time. Like I don't have to see or do anything I don't want to do. And I
Yeah.
can just be in this moment. Like something catches my eye, I can go that way. And that for me, I mean, that was a really beautiful gift.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. That's, yeah, it's so wonderful because, like, one of the things I hear from you when you're talking about like chaos versus order, like, you know what you're getting with Disney World, right? Because there is such consistency in a lot of different ways. And that once you're there, you're like, oh, well, I can actually kind of sit in this consistency and this order and be comforted in the fact that there is going to be some disorder, there's going to be chaos because there's going to be this and there's going to be that, and know that I'm still like taken care of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too. You just there is a sense of safety being there.
Yeah.
And props to like all the cast members too, because I mean, they do help make that experience like so much better. And even like dining alone or, just you get this extra special care. And that's the other thing too. People are always like, I don't want to eat by myself. And do it. It's amazing because the cast members are there. And even like the concierge at, Beach Club where I stayed, like every day they would check in on me, like, hey, how you doing? Like, do you need
Yeah.
anything today? Have any questions for us? Like, because they knew I was traveling alone. And
Yeah.
I just think like just having
I
those
I always wonder like what these like 20-year-old kids from the college program, like what kind of adults they are going to, well, I mean, there are so many of them have already evolved, but like evolved into in seeing all these people like choose themselves so many times. Like it's just kind of interesting. And it's so interesting because it's so nice to be able to like connect with them and the type of like care and enthusiasm, and then like, oh right, they're 20-year-old kids from the college program.
I know. I booked a capture your moment session
Oh,
and
awesome.
I did a back to back. So I had 40 minutes and I had they give you a photographer and like a security person to kind of move crowds away.
Yeah, yeah,
And oh my, these young adults, like I think 25 and 27 or something. And I'm like, I'm old enough to be
yeah.
your mother. And they
Oh,
look at me
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
you can be my mother. And I'm like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And but there's still like there's not this separation or this, they're not hesitant to like interact and be playful and,
yeah,
make your experience like, oh, well, she's old enough to be my mom, so I have to act a certain way or be a certain way. It's like we were
yeah,
being silly and joking around. And it was, I mean, it was just a fun experience to
yeah,
just
totally.
be so intimate with the cast members on this trip too, which is, I think, something you miss when you are with a group of people.
Totally, totally. What's one tip that you would give someone going on a solo trip to Disney?
Oh my gosh. If you are feeling it in your heart, then do it.
I love
Don't
it.
don't hesitate. Just if you're feeling it, that feeling is there for a reason. And
Mm.
whether you can actually identify or see what you're being called to do, it was put there for a reason, and you need to follow that.
Oh,
Because
I love
I
that.
think what you'll find on the other end is magic.
Yeah, I love that. That if you're like, if you're feeling called, then go. Because once I realized that there isn't a stigma of going by yourself, sure, it's a very family-oriented place, but if you're not with your family, you don't necessarily feel that. And one thing we haven't talked too much about, but that there's a ton of things for adults to do, and adults to do as adults, but also adults to do for their inner child, right? Which is something that
Yeah.
you've talked about, which is such a special place to go on vacation.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's amazing. Like just allowing yourself to, or allowing your inner child to come out and
Yeah.
explore and just have an amazing time without worrying about, like oh, I shouldn't be too loud, or I shouldn't have said that,
Yeah.
or, so
Yeah.
it
Triggering
is,
your parents like weird tempers that you don't always know what's going to trigger the temper and the snap and the
yeah,
this and yeah.
absolutely. And one thing that you had said was, about, being with a partner that, wasn't like on the
Yeah.
same level as Disney is
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you, and didn't really want to go back, but you didn't feel like you could go by yourself yet.
Hmm.
And I always think, everything happens exactly as it's
Totally.
supposed to, and we do things exactly when we need to. And for me, I have always been so worried about everyone else's happiness and everyone else's well-being that I didn't feel connected to myself. And so I
Mm.
couldn't make choices for myself. And, it's not anything I can manufacture, it's not anything you can force. But once you start to choose yourself, you you experience that reconnection to self, that connection
Yeah.
that we've had since we've been born, that gets lost with all of the
Yeah.
conditioning that we've had throughout our whole life. And so once I think we find or reconnect with ourselves or rediscover that connection to self, the choices come so much easier.
Oh,
Like we
totally.
can feel
Totally.
it and we're like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And it's not just about going to Disney, it's about every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
It's like choosing yourself and not
Hmm.
feeling guilty and not thinking that you're selfish. It's not judging yourself at all. But I think once we experience connection to self, we can, and we feel like, I have to go to Disney. We go to Disney.
Well, and like I think for some people that the idea of choosing yourself is quite intimidating because they don't know themselves, right? And so like a way to like bring a couple of these pieces of the conversation together, if you're feeling compelled to go, then it might actually be the environment that you need to start connecting to yourself in a way that
Yeah.
you can like learn what those choices are for yourself,
Even like
right?
what you like. That was the biggest thing for me. Like people would be like, what's your favorite song? I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your favorite song? Okay. Oh yeah, I like that
Yeah,
one
I like
too.
that song. Yeah.
What's your favorite food? Oh, I don't know. What do you want to eat tonight? What do you want to eat tonight? It was always
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
deflecting because
Yeah.
I didn't know. And that might sound weird to people. Like, what do
No,
you
I
mean
don't
she
think it
doesn't
sounds
know what her
weird.
favorite song is? What do you mean she doesn't know, what her favorite food is? Those are easy questions. But when you've lived your whole life
Mm-hmm.
in survival mode where it's easier and there's, less impact when you just kind of do what everyone else wants and you stay in the shadows and your wants and needs are never met because you don't want them to be met
Yeah.
because you don't want that exposure. You don't know,
Yeah.
what you like. And so yeah, like your advice is beautiful. Like maybe if you are being called, you can decide, let me try this because I've never had it before, and
Yeah.
maybe I'll like it and maybe I won't, but I can make that choice.
Yeah.
And then I'll
Yeah.
know, like for the future, oh no, I don't like that, or I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel good to me.
Right. I
But it's
don't
giving
want to
ourselves
go on It's a
permission.
Small World.
I don't want to do it. I
Yeah.
just don't want to do it. And I remember with I was with my sister and her husband and their two little boys. And we were in Magic Kingdom and we were on It's a Small World. And my oldest nephew said, I don't ever want to ride this again. And I like looked at him like, well, we have to ride this ride every single time we're in Disney.
Yeah.
And I'm like, after that, I'm like, that is so, I love that he is at that time, I think he was six or
Yeah.
6 or 7 or something, probably six. And he could say, I don't like this. And I don't want to do this. And it's okay. Like there was no one saying like, nope, you're riding this again and you're riding this again.
Yeah.
But he felt safe. And
Yes.
to me,
Yes.
that's like the culture we are now creating is
Yeah.
it's safe for kids to express what they want and what they don't want. And to me, that's even more important, like when they watch the adults making
Yes.
choices for
Yes.
themselves, then they feel safe to do the same thing. And I'm hoping that, this feeling and this journey that I'm on will help my granddaughters as well. You know,
Yeah.
just being able to say, I don't like that. And I can have an emotional meltdown and it's okay and I'm not going to get in trouble. And I can tell you how I really feel and you're not going to judge me for it. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
be in trouble for it. And I wasn't able to do that with my own daughters,
Mm.
but I can do that with my granddaughters.
I love it. I love it. Well, I don't want to keep you anymore, but I'm going to ask you one last question before we say goodbye, which is what is your favorite park? And what is one thing that you would want to like do or eat or ride the next
Oh.
time you're solo at the park?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I I love all the parks, but my number one favorite park is Magic Kingdom because
Mhm.
I am a princess girl.
Well, I should say when you were talking about like that you didn't like or like didn't think you were deserving of photographs, I was like, oh my God, you're so gorgeous. When you got on the call today, you're like your blonde hair, you're wearing a blue shirt. I was like total Cinderella vibes. I did not think that that would have been like a narrative in your head, but there you go. Yes, total princess girl. I love it.
Well, and that's funny you say that too, because my husband always says to me, he goes, I think people are so drawn to your light because you don't see your beauty like everyone else
Oh,
sees your beauty. Like
yeah.
you're not seeing what everybody else sees.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that trip that I took, at the end of April, beginning of May of this year, that solo trip, that I finally like it crystallized what he was saying. Like I was
Oh,
able, the photographers would show me the back of the camera and be like, look at this. This is great. This is so good. And I'm like, I see it. Like
yeah.
I see it, but I was like, I could see it in my eyes. Like you are, and you saw it in the photos too. Like,
Totally,
oh, she
totally.
is full of joy. But that was like
Joy.
that first time in my whole life where I saw like that happiness and that joy where I'm like, I see what my husband sees now. Like I see
Yeah.
it. And so, yeah, that was so, I don't know. I just kind of derailed your question, but
No, no, no. Yeah. So Magic Kingdom's your favorite park. What's
yes,
your
because I
favorite
am a
thing to
princess
do or
girl.
eat solo?
Oh my gosh. I know this is like kind of controversial, but
No, do it.
oh my gosh. So I have Dole Whip is my jam. Like
Cool.
I have to have probably like 3 to 5 Dole Whips every time I'm in Magic
Love
Kingdom.
it. Love it.
So definitely Dole Whip. And I know that people are like kind of 50-50 with the Dole Whip. And then my ride right now that I mean, I I love Seven Dwarfs. Like I rode
Yeah.
like the last time I was in Magic Kingdom, I think I rode it maybe 6 times.
Oh my God.
And this
I
I
don't
had
think
the
I've
most
ridden it
just
6 times like in total.
oh really no, like in one day.
Yeah,
But
that's crazy. I
I
love
will
it.
tell you, I was in line for Seven Dwarfs and everyone was getting ready for fireworks to happen. And I'm like, I'm not going to get out of line. I'm like literally so close. And so, I was waiting in line and the fireworks started. Well, I'm boarding, the coaster and literally we're going up that first incline and we had this explosion of fireworks above us and I have goosebumps talking about it now even because everyone in our carts were like oh like oohing and eyeing and it was magical like to
Oh,
be up
so
that
amazing.
high and have like the fireworks. I'm like I couldn't have planned this better
Yeah.
like if like I wasn't like actually planning to be on the fireworks during the ride. I was hoping I'd be off of the ride and being finding a place
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
watch fireworks. But I'm like experiencing the fireworks on Seven Dwarfs, like going up like at the very peak and like big explosion of color. And I
Oh
was like,
God, sounds
it was
magical.
magic. It was magic. Like I could not have experienced that or planned that if I tried. And so it was beautiful. So yeah, like Seven Dwarfs is like a must every time I go. And then of course, Dole Whips
Don't
for
whip.
breakfast, lunch,
Well, I
and
love
dinner
it. Yeah, I mean, why not? And for dessert, right?
and
Like
dessert.
breakfast,
Yeah.
lunch, dinner, dessert, snacks. Wendy,
Although
this is
the
just
Aurora cone, I have to say,
ooh, yes.
I just tried that for the first time and That's right up there, aside from like turning your whole mouth blue. But
Yeah, I had a Snow White cone and it was delicious, but it was like melting and I got a couple pictures before it like melted to my hand.
I like
Wendy, this has just
that.
been like the most amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your light and sharing your story and sharing your own sense of liberation there. Yeah, it's just been really, really wonderful to connect and again, thank you so much for sharing it, choosing to share on the podcast. This
Thank you
little
so much.
podcast.
Oh my gosh. And you are a light and you are a
Oh,
joy
thank you.
and just a beautiful soul. And I so appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And this is definitely like stepping through the doors for me
I
and
love
just being
it. I
able
love it.
to feel comfortable sharing my story. And I know I stumbled a few times during the
No, no.
podcast because this is actually the first time sharing my story with with someone that is
Yeah.
not like a family or a friend. So
Yeah.
so thank you for this opportunity too,
Oh, thank you.
help propel me even further on this journey.
Yeah, well, I hope we stay connected and we can have more conversations about other things like because I just think that it's yeah, like there's something that you're connecting to, I think, that is both universal as well as very personal to you, obviously. And I just think that it's just so great to be able to connect this around something that is safe and liberating. And so thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey Solos, it's Samantha. I hope you like this episode and all the episodes of Disney Solo Magic, the podcast about the magic of going to Disney World solo. Just a reminder to subscribe, to rate, review, to comment, to share, so that other people can learn about the magic of going to Disney World solo. Also, connect with me on social media. You can find me on Instagram, on Threads, on Facebook, and on the blog disneysolomagic.blogspot.com. On Instagram, I am Disney_solo_magic_podcast, as well as on Threads at Disney_solo_magic_podcast. And on Facebook, it's Disney Solo Magic. Again, the blog address is disneysolomagic.blogspot.com. Until next week, bye!